breast cancer. And she looked at me, she goes, you really need to be doing this yourself. When I went through breast cancer treatment, I was playing tennis twice a week. I was so hurt. I was demoralized. People say, well, that's how you responded to it. No. She was clueless, to use a good 80s term. She was clueless. And so what the book, I hope to do through the book, is say, here's how you love well. Here's how you help. You ask the question, what do you need? How can I help? And you listen and do that, and don't come up with, as my mother used to call it, creative alternatives of how you're going to get it done. So that's the basic thrust of the book. But I also want to give credit where credit is due for things that people have done right. One example of that is I had surgery way back a long time ago when I was still ambulatory and had a very large service dog. And we had planned for everything else but the fact that she was going to need to go out and go to the bathroom. And my pastor, I was brand new at the church, and he called just to see how I was doing. And I said, Misha needs to go out, and I can't take her out. And he said, I'll be right there.
Wow.
And he hung up the phone, and he came from the church office and walked her and took care of her. Then he went back to the church office and made a schedule and called people in the church. We had people that worked different shifts in the church, and every 4 to 6 hours, somebody showed up at my door to walk my dog.
That's amazing.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I felt so loved and so included and so seen.
And that's how a community works together.
Yes, absolutely.
Or we help each other.
Yes.
And we don't often do that anymore until we're hit with disaster.
We could learn a lot from watching what's going on in Asheville, in that area right now. They're not waiting for the government to come in and do stuff. They're taking care of each other. I saw a guy with a bulldozer that was bulldozing away mud so that people could look for their possessions and for their family members. And my favorite story coming out of this is the mule pack mules. The mules that they've brought out to bring, that they usually use for pulling wagons and things. Those mules are hauling supplies.
Yeah,
to places that only a mule could get.
Yeah, people. Like in the olden days,
indeed,
as they
the
used
olden
to say, the olden days.
I keep waiting to see.
I saw a video of that.
Used to ride around on a mule, and I keep waiting to see my mother coming along in her linsey woolsey dress, hanging out on the mule. So
it is an incredible sight to see how people in dire straits have actually reached out to help each other and not wait around for anyone to help, and not complaining, but actually getting to work and waiting for the government to step in. I think it's important.
It's incredibly important. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do through capability consulting and the public speaking is to encourage people with disabilities to figure out how they can be resourcefully resilient and how they can learn to take care of themselves in the best way possible. Ask for what they need. Stop waiting for the government to provide it. Ask for your friends for what you need. Ask your family. Ask your faith community. Ask your neighbors. It's amazing what people will do when asked.
I'm talking to Melissa Ortiz. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk to her about her and how she became. She is the founder and owner of Capability Consulting, and you reach out to help people who are living with disabilities. Through Capabilities Consulting, what are you helping people understand about how in their disability they can still find the ability to help themselves?
I was doing that a long time before I founded Capability Consulting. My life has been all about figuring out a way to get things done and get them done well, and realizing when I was beat and moving on to the next thing. And sometimes I'm not real clear on when I'm beat, but I try to share my story with other people with disabilities to say, you can do this. I am living proof that you can do this. And then I don't just share my story, because I think if I just run around and share my story, that's nice. That's sort of like the preacher that comes in and tells you about the good news, but then doesn't come and sit with you when your heart is broken. And I was the commissioner of the Administration on Disability at Health and Human Services for the first half of the Trump administration. And one of the most amazing moments that I had in that whole time wasn't a policy discussion. I sat with the family who had a newly diagnosed child who was there with us and just listened to them share their hearts. and gave them some ideas about where they could look for things. And it was great because I had my whole team with me that knew exactly where to find those things.
Oh, it's remarkable, actually, and I'm glad you're doing it. You're also going to create as I understand, you have plans to create a nonprofit that would provide more compassion in the consultancy.
It's going to be called Compassionate Capability, and we will do things like micro grants. There are things that especially children with disabilities need, that their IEPs, which is an individualized education plan for school, that their IEP recommends that insurance won't cover, or you have to fight tooth and nail to get insurance to even consider it. Things like iPads that help children who can't communicate verbally. Things like headphones that help children who have extreme sensitivity to sound. So I will be doing micro grants to help families get those things.
Awesome. Melissa, let's get personal.
Okay.
How did this all begin for you? Your journey to where you are today and what you do?
It began for me before I was even born. My parents were not Christians, they were not people of faith, they were churchgoers. And they were in a commuter marriage, and my mother found out she was pregnant after they'd been trying for 5 years. And when the doctor told them that to save my mother's life, they needed to end the pregnancy, they both said, no, we're going to do this. Well, that child might be a vegetable. Well, we're going to do this. What part of this are you not hearing, doctor? We're going to have a baby. And finally, at the end of the 7th month of the pregnancy, they had to take me to save my mother's life. They had no heartbeat on me, didn't think I was alive at all or responsive. And they threw me over in an incubator and saved my mom's life. And then all of a sudden realized that I was wanting to interact with people. Imagine that. I'm still interactive. And so they began to work on me, and they saved me, and they said, this child is not going to live to see her 18th birthday. I celebrate my 40-year high school reunion next year.
Really?
No, excuse me, not next year. It's this year in next weekend. That's what I meant to say, next weekend. So let's edit that out to say I celebrate my 40-year high school reunion next weekend. And it's just so fun to defy the odds. But I learned early on that I could communicate well. I learned early on about work. My father was, among other things, a fundraiser. And he had a political meeting one night, and I was 3 and a half. I remember it vividly, and you'll understand why in a moment. And he had to take me to the meeting because we couldn't keep a nanny, and my mother had an opera rehearsal. So he takes me to the meeting, and he hands me off to the office manager at the campaign office and said, here, I've got to go talk about money. She's very bright. She can lick envelopes and stamps, and you've got a mailing to get out. Put her to work. So for 3 hours, I licked envelopes and stamps, and then they found out that I knew my numbers, so I helped them sort by zip code. At the end of the night, the lady called me over to her desk, and there I was with my long ponytails and my short leg braces, and I said, yes, ma'am, and she said, I have something for you. And she opened her drawer and pulled out a shiny $50, and she handed it to me, and she said, people that work get paid. And that created such a work ethic and a sense of accomplishment in me that I think my family was a little tired about the fact that I was charging to make my bed every day and things like that. But I learned that if I could do things, and then I began to look around and realize that not everybody had the same family supports and opportunities that I did.
That's right.
And I learned to try to help them. One of the most life-changing moments for me was after having grown up in suburban Atlanta, where everything needs to look pretty and fit into a certain box, and only being included in things when somebody's mother made sure that I was included, or my mother made sure I was included. We went to Israel for these 3 years, and all of a sudden I had classmates who fought over who got to piggyback me and who got to make the chair that you make with your arms to carry me, things like that. And that was life-changing for me, because all of a sudden I realized that not only did I have a mission in life, I had a peer group that would accept me. And when we came back to the States, I would accept nothing less than full inclusion. And I have always been a fighter, sometimes taking on other people's battles, and I've had to learn not to do that. My mother used to joke that I could be dropped off in the middle of the desert and find a caravan of camels to bring me to the nearest oasis, and then figure out how to get the helicopter to come get me to take me home. And that's just who I am. One of my keynotes that I give is the 4 points of authentic living. And I talk about resilience. Basically, no matter what you come up against, resolving that you're going to either overcome it or figure out a way through it, under it, or around it. I talk about resourcefulness, and that resourcefulness is how you figure out how to be resilient. And then rest. And I've had to learn the hard way that rest is a part of everybody's needs, especially someone with a disability. And then the last, and I'll get back to the rest in a minute, but the last piece of that is redemption. As Christians, we know that ultimate redemption comes through the shed blood of Jesus Christ. But the neat thing about our lives and the way that God designed things is that everybody's story one day is going to be a roadmap for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is very redemptive. But very quickly, getting back to the rest part of it is I had a fall right before the 4th of July, and they wanted to do all this, the ER wanted to do all this surgery, but I wanted to go see my doctor. And he said, all right, I'm going on vacation. You can sit still for 3 weeks. And that means you're either in the bed or on the couch, and that's it. And then we'll talk about what needs to be done when I got back. He was smart enough to understand, and he knew me well enough to know that once the inflammation from everything calmed down, we would understand what surgery, if any, needed to happen. And in that 3 weeks, I learned a lot. I felt so much better after that 3 weeks of non-activity, and how foolish I've been these 58 years to not rest when I needed to.
Well, that's something that I think a lot of Americans who are so active and so busy, because, you know, we're very busy in America, including myself. And one of the toughest things I learned is to rest. And my wife would argue that I don't rest enough. I'm going to go back over those 4 R's again. What are they?
Resilience, resourcefulness, rest, and redemption.
That'll preach.
Thanks.
And it will also teach. And I believe through your life it will also reach many people
I hope so.
who need to understand the value in that and the importance of that. But also, I would even say there's another R, and that is reaching out.
I like it.
To help those
I like it.
who need to be reminded that help is there.
Okay, I'm going to have to go rewrite the keynote because we're up to 6 R's now. So
You grew up in Israel as well.
for 3 years, yep.
For 3 years. For those 3 years that you lived in Israel, based on what you see Israel going through today, what is your message to America about why we should value our strongest ally in the Middle East?
First of all, we're commanded by God to value them. But for people that may not necessarily want to look at this through the eyes of faith, the only reason that the Middle East hasn't blown sky high before now is because of the democracy of Israel, because of the military strength of Israel. And we need to be doing everything we can to support their right to exist, their right to have solid, secure borders, and their right to defend all of that. And the people that were responsible for October 7th need to be held fully accountable to the fullest extent of local and international law.
And the hostages have to be returned.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So now let me bring it back to America. What's your hope for America?
My hope for America is that we learn how to be neighbors again, that we learn how to talk to each other. If you get an email from me from my capability consulting account, you notice it's in purple. And somebody said, why do you put everything in purple? I said, well, I like purple. It's a royal color, and I like it. But the real reason is this. Until the red folks and the blue folks learn to meet in the middle and form a purple solution to some things, we will continue to be in this mess. My neighbor is not my enemy. Someone who has a different opinion from me is not my enemy. And I need to learn to look at them as a human being created in the image of God. And my hope for America is that we can learn to look at each person that we see as a person of inordinate worth and value, not a political opponent or ally.
So glad to hear that. Thank you. Melissa Ortiz.
Yes,
Being
thank you.
America's Hope. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Much love to you.
You too.
Back with more in just a moment.